Καλησπέρα και χρόνια πολλά. Η ελληνική startup είναι εδώ. Hello everyone. Thank you for being with us tonight for Open Coffee. Tonight we have the privilege of hosting one of the leading venture capital funds in Europe, Index Ventures, plus two quite exciting, if you ask me, technology startups. We are going to start with short presentations of the latter. And the first of them is Inaccel. Please welcome the founder and CEO of Inaccel, Christoforos Kachris.
Okay, thanks, George. Thank you, everyone. It's really nice to be here in the startup community of Greece. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Inaccel, what we are doing, what are the problems that we try to solve, and how what it is the journey so far, right? So first of all, as a startup company, we try to answer the most important question for a company, right? So the most important question is what users want, right? So we need to have a product that users want. So according to a survey in 2016 on the big data community and the software developers, what users want is, first of all, performance, right? So they want to run their application much faster, so they don't want to waste time, and the companies don't want to waste time on just waiting for the execution. But not only performance, right? Because assembly can also provide very high performance, but nobody is writing in assembly or in C, right? So everybody is writing their code on Java or Python, right? So they want ease of programming also, right? So they don't want to waste time on assembly or lower level language. They need higher level languages. And of course, they want easy of deployment, not only easy of programming, but when you talk about data centers and cloud computing, you need also to talk about easy of deployment, how you scale your application, how you utilize multiple resources, etc. Right? So we try to solve about this one. We try to talk about this one. So first of all, about performance. I will elaborate more on this one, why processors, why general purpose processor can no longer increase their performance anymore, right? So about the ease of programming, there are many software tools now like OpenCL, CUDA, etc., so that they can be used in order to speed up the programming of specialized accelerators. So we try to focus on ease of deployment for hardware accelerators. And I will elaborate more about why we need now hardware accelerators. So this is a very nice graph that shows how the performance of the processors has increased in the last 40 years, right? So in the past, between 1985 and 2004, if you were a computer architect, you were very lucky because if you wanted to increase the performance of your system, of your processor, you just had to wait until to have the next node. Instead of 19 nanometers, if you go to 45 nanometers, automatically you can increase the clock frequency and automatically you have twice as much performance, right? Moore's law, right? So it was very nice because you just had to wait and automatically in 2 years from now you had twice as much processing performance. Around 2004, 2005, you notice that the companies start advertising about the clock frequency, 2 gigahertz, 3 gigahertz, etc., and they started talking about multi-core. Why this has happened? Because they could no longer increase the clock frequency in the processors. Why is that? Because of the power dissipation, right? The chip was becoming too much hot, right? So they couldn't afford it to cool it efficiently, right? So they would have to go to water cooling, etc., in order to cool it, right? So that's why they stopped advertising and they stopped increasing the clock frequency, but they had more transistors, right? So they had more transistors. So they said, what we can do about that? Okay, let's put more processors, multi-core, right? So from 2005, companies started advertising about a 2-core, a dual-core, a quad-core, 4 cores, 8 cores, etc. And this worked pretty much well around up to 2010, 2011. Right? So why is that? Because if you have application like image processing, it's very nice. You just split your image in 4 quarters, and each quarter is allocated to a specific core. And that's all. You can instantly increase your performance. So this is very nice, right? But at some point, the application cannot, every application can be parallelized, right? So you can no longer increase the performance just by splitting the data to several cores. So now we are at the point that we cannot increase anymore the performance of the processor just by using, just the old tricks, just by increasing the performance, the clock frequency, or just by keep adding more and more cores, right? So now we are stalled a little bit. So what is the next step? David Patterson is one of the main architects of the RISC architecture and one of the main architects of the general purpose processors, right? So the only path left, according to David Patterson and according to the industry, is domain-specific accelerators, right? Just do a few tasks, right, but extremely well, right? So now we are in the area of specialization. You can no longer have general purpose processor, right? So actually, we will continue to have general purpose processor, but we will enhance this processor with domain-specific accelerators, right? What does a domain-specific accelerator means? It's very simple. It's actually specialized circuit that does a task, only a specific task, but it does it very efficiently. Right, so if you have an application, this is very easy to understand. If you have an application that you need to do 2,000 multiplications, okay, in a general purpose processors, you have to use the same ALU 2,000 times. So you will use it, let's say, in 2,000 clock cycles. And instead, in the hardware accelerators, you just convert it from a sequential processing to parallel processing. So if the application permits, you can do 2,000 multiplication in a single clock cycle, right? And this is how you manage to achieve around, let's say, 100x speed up, 200x speed up, etc. Right? So this is a basic idea. You build specialized circuits for a specific amount of tasks that you can do extremely well. And actually, this is not a new idea. In the embedded system world, in mobile phones, for example, we have specialized circuits to do JPEG decoding, for example, or MP3 decoding. There are specialized circuits inside the chip, right? So the idea is not new, but now the data center world is embracing this idea, right? So we have different flavors, okay? So we have CPUs, the general purpose processor, that can do any kind of application, but not so much efficient. We have GPUs, right, that they can do application like image processing or video processing very well, because it is very easy to split the data and allocate it to several. Okay, now it's working, okay. You can split the data, and now you can allocate it to several cores. And then you have the FPGAs, that they are specialized circuits in which the instructions are hardware inside the circuit, right? So you can build specialized circuits that do specific applications, right? And actually, the idea of specialization is not new. And actually, we see it also in the nature, right? So one of the most sophisticated systems in the world, the brain, is based on specialization, right? The brain is not, homogeneous. Every part of the brain consists of different kinds of synapses and neurons specialized for specific tasks. We have a special area for the emotions. We have a special area for the motion, for the movement. We have a special area for the image processing, for the vision, right? For speed, for the to talk, to listen, etc. So, right. So it's the idea of specialization. It's not new, and actually, this is one of the most efficient systems because it only consumes 10 watts or 9 watts or something like that, right? So it's also not only very efficient, but also very energy efficient, right, on this one. So that's why FPGAs is getting so much traction in the last years. But is there any market for this one? So in 2016, Intel bought Altera, one of the major FPGAs vendors back then, for $16 billion, right? So this was a big bet. And they bought this company because they foreseen that in the future, data centers will need to use FPGAs in order to keep increasing their performance in an affordable way. So according to Intel, there is this prediction that up to 1/3 of cloud service providers' nodes, they are going to use FPGAs by this year. This was a prediction almost 3 years ago. And actually, you see now that Amazon started first deploying FPGAs as a computing resources. Then Alibaba, Baidu, Huawei, Nimbix, Tencent Cloud also followed, right? So if you notice, only one of them is a US company, right? All of the other cloud vendors is Chinese vendor, right? Of course, not any, unfortunately, not any European, right? And actually now, Microsoft Bing, is using FPGAs in order to do the searches, right? So if you do something on Bing, a search in Bing, so it will take place on FPGAs. Why is that? Because Microsoft said, okay, this is a very specialized task. Okay, let's program an FPGA to do very efficiently only this one, right? So it is projected that by 2025, the data center accelerator market will be around $35 billion, and FPGA will have a big chunk out of this, right? So what we did at Inaccel, right? So the FPGAs are hard to program. So as I said, this can be solved now using OpenCL or CUDA or high-level frameworks. But there are still other challenges if somebody wants to use FPGAs. It is hard to scale out. It is hard to share or virtualize, and it is hard to deploy. It's not as much easy as it is done in the CPU world. So what we did at Inaccel, we faced this problem. Actually, we faced this problem because we were FPGA users ourselves, right? So we tried to solve this problem. In the CPU world, you have frameworks like Kubernetes, you have VMware, you have the operating system. All of this does not exist in the domain of FPGA world. So we developed this FPGA resource manager, cluster manager, that actually serves as a Kubernetes and operating system and a VMware at the same time in order to allow very easy deployment, instant scaling, and very seamless sharing of the FPGA resources, right? So we cover the full stack in order to allow software developers without any prior knowledge about FPGAs to utilize and deploy FPGAs, right? So besides this one, we also develop our own accelerators. When we mean accelerators, we develop IP cores that are used to program the FPGAs, right? FPGAs are empty, and you program them in order to make the specialized circuits, right? So we also develop IP cores for machine learning, financial application, analytics, and genomics that can be used on top of the Intel or the Xilinx FPGAs. Xilinx is the major vendor of FPGAs, right? And what we have managed to see is that we get significant speed up compared with CPUs, right? So if you compare, for example, machine learning application like logistic regression or K-means clustering, you get around 14 to 15x speed up compared with a multi-core processor, right? So you see the benefit of this one. Instead of waiting 15 hours to finish the training part of the logistic regression, you just have to wait 1 hour. And actually, this is very important for the companies because they don't want the data scientist to wait 15 hours, just to finish their training model, right? So this is very cost efficient. So we did all this technology, and we are very fortunate because we have now the chance to work with Intel, with FPGA, with Xilinx, Microsoft Azure. We are also part of the AWS ecosystem and Alibaba ecosystem, right? So we have really a very tight collaboration with Xilinx and Intel, and not only about the future products, that they are going to deploy, but also with the current frameworks and how we collaborate with them, to solve all of these problems about the scalability, virtualization, and deployment of FPGAs. So this is very nice. And actually, in the last year, last July, we got the first big contract from a US company. Then in October of 2019, we worked very closely with Microsoft about the SQL Server, and we saw how SQL Server can be integrated with Spark, and the Spark workload can be offloaded to the FPGAs very easily in order to speed up the acceleration of machine learning workloads. And actually, we're also working with a Chinese vendor in Beijing on how we can speed up several kinds of applications, and there are more to come now in 2020. So actually, there is a very nice, there is quite a movement and acquisition in this area. Intel, as I said, bought Altera for $16.7 billion in 2016. Last 2 weeks ago, Intel acquired Habana Labs for $2 billion. And Habana Labs, what they did is that they are doing specialized chips only for deep neural networks, inference, and training, right? So this is all they're doing. They're doing specialized chips for deep neural networks, both for the training and for the inference. And because Intel wanted to have it into its portfolio, they acquired this company for $2 billion, right? And imagine that Intel already developed its own deep neural networks chips called Nirvana, right? So, and of course, there are other acquisitions on this area. Intel acquired Omnitech for video acceleration. VMware acquired BitFusion to virtualize GPUs, not FPGAs, only GPUs, hardware accelerator. So there is quite of acquisition in this area. So we're working, in this domain around in the last 2 years, and we had the chance, in order to advertise all of this technology, we had the chance to advertise it to several venues, several conferences and exhibitions in Xilinx, at Intel, Spark Summit, and had the chance to talk with the major players like Google, Amazon, etc. So that's all, about our journey so far and what we are doing at Inaccel. So we're working on this one in the last 2 years, and actually in the past I was working around 15 years in the academia, and actually I think this is one of the most exciting and I think most interesting decision I have ever made to move to the startup community, and this is really exciting. All right, so George, I don't know if there are any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you, Christofore. Quite frontier stuff, and we would appreciate to hear any questions that you may have.
Yes, please.
So you mentioned that you mentioned a few use cases, but do you see this at the moment? FPGA is mostly kind of confined to fairly high performance niche use cases, for want of a better word. Where do you think you're going to start seeing kind of the first mass adoption of FPGA?
I think this year is very important for the FPGA community, because now that the FPGAs are available as resources in the cloud or in private, most people they are going to start deploying, hopefully, in the FPGA world. So one of the most promising application is financial and genomics, right? Because it is extremely defined, and they need high performance computing for this one. So these are the most promising area: fintech, high frequency trading, etc., and genomics. So these are the most promising. So people expect that in 2020, using the Inaccel framework, hopefully, will make much easier the transition to the FPGA.
Other questions? Are there any? Christofore, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Next up is Michalis Petihakis from Orfium. Please welcome him.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Wow, I see a full house. So thank you, George. Christopher, amazing presentation. Thank you. I'll try to keep up with it. So my name is Michael. I'm currently the CTO of Orfium Music, and today I'm gonna walk you through about our journey in the music industry. So I'm sure everybody, I should be closer to the microphone. Sorry, I cannot move. So I'll try to be here. Still up, this moves. So, okay, I'm sure everybody here has an opinion on what the music is. All of you listen to music in various ways. I'm sure everybody here has Spotify on their phones or YouTube Music. Some of you maybe use Apple Music. Obviously, I know very few people do this. So music in your mind is usually about fame, riches, glamorous, all of those things. But for us that we're actually in the industry, music is mostly about contracts, the boring stuff. And I can assure you that almost 70% of the whole industry is mixed accountants and lawyers and people like us, like the boring stuff. So a very, very tiny portion is all the fame that you actually see and you know about. So let me take you to the journey of what the industry is. So music starts when an artist is in the room and they conceive the lyrics or the melody. Oh, really? Okay. Sorry. Okay. So sorry. So the music starts when the artists are in the room and they think of the lyrics. So this is the conception of music. So they write down the lyrics and then obviously they need to make some money. They have to give it to their manager, usually those we call publishers. And the publishers, they have to find somebody to sell it as well, so they go to the record labels. So this is the stuff that you most probably know, the record labels. And the record labels find some artists, they do a recording, and then the recording goes through a distributor to your phone. So you may know like Spotify. So here we can see the various channels that music can make money. So retail, you can go to a store and buy. Not anymore, but let's say you could. You can, even Spotify is considered. Performance like a venue. Synchronization like YouTube, so you can make money if you're an artist through YouTube, and obviously you can sell your brand through merchandise. Similarly, works for artists and record labels. So we, in our minds, we have different source of revenue, but I'm not gonna go into extreme detail, but we see, even if you're an artist, or a record label, or a writer, a composer, and you have the same channels of revenue, but slightly different. So in Orpheum, what we do and what we aim to be the digital infrastructure of the whole music industry. So we try to make it easy for artists, record label, publishers, distributors to go through the journey of the music. So music for us is mainly the rights. So who owns the rights? And okay, if I play this song, will I get paid? Or who's listening to it and why and stuff like that. Or if somebody makes a cover song, someone has to get paid. So in Orpheum, we help companies over this journey, and at the end of all, we give some analytics like, okay, this was a massive hit, or we should never produce music like this, nobody listens to it, or this is a very niche market, we should focus more. So record labels do this a lot. So before I go into more stuff of what we do and some of our products, everybody says to me like, we haven't heard of you, and that's true because we've never done any publicity. So today I'm gonna tell you a little bit how we started. So 5 years ago, two founders from LA, Chris and Drew, they had this amazing idea of creating a platform where they wanted artists to take ownership of the rights, because this is a major problem in the music industry, because mostly record labels actually benefit from this. So they had this idea similar to SoundCloud, where artists could upload their music, and they contacted me. So I liked the idea, so immediately with my colleague Dimitris, we started. So the four of us, we started this idea. So for the next 2 years, we were growing a bit, and we released the first platform. You can still log into the platform. It's called orfium.com. And we have some tens of thousands artists, hundreds of thousands of tracks, but still we weren't profitable. So we were trying to see what's the next step, what we should do. So like for us, March 2017, I'm skipping some details, Rob Wells, a former executive at Universal Music Group, joins our company, becomes the CEO, and he says, okay, guys, like, I love your team, what you've built already, I love the technology, but you have it all wrong. Focus on the B2C market. Let's do some B2B. So, you know, we didn't know better, so we said, okay, let's do something on B2B. So we start and develop our first B2B product, and on September 2017, we have our first major contract with the first client. So with this contract, we boosted our growth, and for the next year, we signed more and more clients, we hired more people. So we come on September 2018, and we've doubled, as you can see, and we released the second product. When I refer to products, I mainly refer to product lines because we have some major products and some peripheral products, and we mainly divide them in sources of revenue. That's why I showed you initially the different parts of revenue. So for the next year, we doubled again, as you can see. So went from 50 employees worldwide to 100 employees on October. And we released the third major product. So for the next year, a projection that we do is that we are going to double again based on the revenues from the new contracts and the new clients. So yes, you may have guessed already, we're a bootstrap company. So we fund our growth based on our revenues. So I guess you recognize the names here, or some of the names. So yes, Sony, the famous Sony that you actually know. When I say publishers, those are the ones who own the rights from the composers, the writers, and the melody creators. And the record labels are the ones that you already know that have the artists. So we have Sony and Warner that you already know. I'm sure you know Red Bull, so we put it because it's famous, but obviously it's a smaller record label, and some of the others that have amazing catalogs, so music that you already know, but you didn't know they belong there. And we have some smaller and medium catalogs as well. So here, our main product today on this whole journey is mainly on the execution of the agreement. So what we mainly do for our biggest clients is we try to find out if there was any usage on YouTube, for example, for some of the rights that royalties are not paid. So, you may have a track, or you may have some lyrics, and somebody is using those, and they should pay by law some commission. So we're making sure that at the huge volumes of YouTube data that's uploaded daily, we find everything that's related to our clients. We also have some peripheral tools that I'm going to show later. But in all these components, we already have some offerings. Either they're in beta testing or private betas for some of our enterprise clients, or we have them already ready, but we don't release them because of strategy. So we still support independent artists, and we love independent artists. They're at the core of Orphan business. We have some business offerings as well, as I've already said, in various domains. I'm not going into detail right now. And obviously, we have some enterprise solutions because we have some enterprise clients. So, obviously, this is a weird journey, not the usual startup story, because, as I said, we started fully bootstrap. We have a journey like we were failing for almost 2 years. So, how we survived and what were our unique strengths. So, as you see, we have LA and San Francisco. I think, yeah, this is San Francisco, and here we have Greece. So, we had 2 different cultures. So on the one side, we have the European mindset, where we like to create roadmaps and make sure we always follow on the roadmap, be agile, and we never deviate from our planning and stuff. On the other side, we have the California thinking, where there are more doers. They like to, be fast and fail fast. Try something. If it doesn't work, let's do something else. But try again, again, and again until something works out. So, we always have this fight with the guys, even today. But at the end of the day, this is what makes us stronger, because I think we always come up to the best solution that works for everybody. But fights are fights. Also, the European culture is extremely close to the US one, so we never had actual communication problems. We have good English-speaking people living in Greece, not me, but I'm referring to my colleagues. So more than that, we were able to build a strong relationship, all the team, and even today, the actual leading team is a small team. We are all more or less at the same age, apart from Rob, obviously, who's at his 50s. She's looking good. And nevertheless, we build a mentality that we're going to be more agile, we're going to always measure our failures, try to improve ourselves and improve the company. And the most important thing in Orfium are the people that we have. We try to hire the best. We have an amazing team of people. We've scaled this over the years. We've hired every single person, and every single person is important. As I say, we're in the music industry, so we try to be creative. So we want our people to be creative, no matter what kind of job they have, either they're engineers, operation. We try people, to bring their best in their work environment every day. So this is where we focus. On the other side, obviously, we try to build a culture where we measure everything. We try to become a data company. We already are a data company, so we call ourselves the supply chain of music data. So we embrace this, and we try to transform ourselves again. So we will become eventually a data-driven company. Even our HR is data-driven a lot. So we base all of our decisions based on data that we gather from our clients or the feedback we get. Also, you may see us a lot in the community around. We support a lot of conferences, meetups, blah, blah, blah. But, now I think we have room for questions. Thank you.
Michal, we thank you. Let me ask this a question first. I'm trying to understand a bit better the mathematics behind your proposition. Let's say I'm an artist.
Mm-hmm.
So I enter your platform, I upload my tracks, and you help me locate, let's say, any YouTube videos that are using in the background my tracks, and they help me ask YouTube and get money out of that.
Exactly.
Give me
that's the easy part, but yes, we
give us a sense about the economics. Let's say you discover videos with, let's say, 1 million views in total. In how much money would this translate to?
1 million views is not that much. You wouldn't become rich. It's not going to be more than 1,000 euros, I think. But because also you split it, so it's peanuts. But we find videos that have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of videos. But the most important thing is that, sorry, I have to go closer to the mic again. So actually, the amount of videos in YouTube, specifically for the major clients that we have, like Sony, they have tracks that they can be in many videos. So we gather the millions of views because we track hundreds of videos or thousands of videos with the same asset that they use a little bit. So the volume of YouTube is so big that the economy is boosting.
Any questions from the audience? Please.
How much of your business is tied to YouTube and streaming? Can
So, to repeat the question, I think the question was how much of our business is based on YouTube? And the second part, if this is...
This is like growing equilibrium for the market stable, or did it feel like the switch will happen from streaming and compressed songs and stuff like that?
So initially, when I presented, the revenue sources, I said, okay, the third was synchronization. Synchronization is currently for YouTube. That's one source of revenue. So obviously, we aim to go on 4 of those, and actually, we already have offerings in other components. YouTube is just the easier to understand because the music industry is a little bit more B2B, so it's not that easy to explain everything. We're not tied to YouTube. Yes, YouTube offerings are a big source of our revenue, but we have already offerings that deviate us from this, and in 2020, I promise you, like the next 3 months, you're going to see our new products that are going to be super interesting.
Since you saying you are data-driven company,
Okay.
yes, the question is, what is the major problem you're facing when you integrate and analyze your data?
Okay, so their main problem. So first of all, I understand that you mainly refer to the audio, but audio is only a small part of the data that we store. We have to process video data, we have to store audio data, and a lot of metadata. So the main pain is actually the metadata, to be honest, and that's a growing pain. Thanks to cloud, we are able to scale, and that's why we're so close to the community of Amazon and stuff, because we have growing pains every moment. Like even as we speak right now, our database is growing extremely fast. So yeah, only because of scaling technologies like serverless databases. You may have heard of those, but yes, those help us a lot to scale. Otherwise, we had some issues in the past. Yeah.
So basically a business question. You said at the beginning you were just 4 people in the team, and then you basically you were joined by a famous person in the music industry. How did that happen to begin with? What was the story behind that? And you said that initially your product was a platform for artists, and then you changed completely, you pivoted completely, and you did a B2B product. And so if you can explain that,
Yeah, obviously, because that's the whole point of the story. Like I would say, we didn't know the industry so well, like Rob. So we were able to pivot. So yeah, I'm going back 3 years since you asked. I think, yeah, 3 years now. And obviously, we were looking for a solution, some way to become profitable. Like we couldn't sustain the salaries anymore, we couldn't pay ourselves anymore. So it was a difficult situation, and we were trying to find either an investor or something. So we were doing a lot of meetings, and in some of those, in one of those, we met Rob, and Rob was interested. So he invited actually Chris and Drew for dinner or lunch. This is detail, doesn't matter. So they went out, and Rob wanted to know more, and then he came back again and again. And then we all met. Initially I met him virtually, blah blah blah. So that Rob wanted something different in his life as well. Like he has experienced how to work in a huge institute. He was working in Universal. That was, his past life, so he didn't want to do this anymore, and he wanted to try the startup world. So we have to think like in US terms. So everybody has to go through a startup in their life. So, and we were also open-minded, like Rob came with his idea, we should focus on B2B. He explained to us the industry, and he said, like, maybe we should create a small prototype for this very, very, very small problem. And this is what we did. And we did it well from an engineering perspective and product and all of the team. So this is how it started. So sometimes you need a little bit of luck, but a lot of hard work.
Michael, last question from myself. How will Orfium look like in 3 years from now? And what are your targets with regards to the Greek operation of the company?
So obviously, I cannot say anything about 3 years because we're extremely fast growing, I would say. So I can tell you, obviously for 1 year, maybe 2, not 3. So obviously for the next year, we're going to double. I don't expect us to triple because obviously we're reaching a threshold at some point that maybe we don't need to grow anymore because we're better at engineering or automating stuff, so maybe we don't. But in terms of operations, and that's an extremely important factor that Orfium is investing more and more in the Greek market. It's because we're in the EU. So European Union is an amazing market. It's the second largest market after the US in terms of consumption in YouTube and stuff. So Greece happens to be in the European Union. So through Greece, we can do a lot of operations. So right now, we're focusing on expanding our operations in Europe. So you'll see a lot of us happening through Greece.
Thank you and best of luck.
Thank you.
So tonight, better? And this one. So tonight we have the pleasure of hosting Index Ventures, arguably a leading European venture capital fund. So please welcome Ari Helgason, principal from Index Ventures. So Ari, it's great to have you with us tonight, but first things first, what brings you here?
So there's a kind of immediate answer to that question and then a kind of more convoluted answer. So the immediate answer is that we were having lunch in London together a couple of months ago, and you were telling me about some of the amazing startups that have been popping up in Greece, and I thought, wow, this is not a geography that we'd been spending a lot of time on, and we were extremely pleasantly surprised that the type of talent and the type of companies that you have here. The slightly longer answer is that, so I'm part of the investment team at Index Ventures in London. We're a global venture capital firm, so we are dual headquartered between San Francisco and London. But actually our roots go further back, and we were founded in '97. And the sort of founding insight behind Index back then was that awesome entrepreneurs and great talent can come from anywhere, and great companies can be built from anywhere. And back then, it was considered to be extremely eccentric at best to be building a kind of West Coast style, US style venture capital firm in Europe, because everyone knew at the time that you had to be in Silicon Valley to build a big business. And thankfully, my partners proved those people wrong, and we've managed to build, a kind of global firm out of Europe. And so, just to kind of give you some key stats, we've raised over $5 billion since then, deployed a good chunk of that. We make about 35 new investments a year, half of those in Europe. We invest all the way from kind of very early stage seed, Series A, so kind of $1 to $15 million investments, all the way up to kind of pre-IPO. So we have a venture fund where we do early stage, and then we have a growth fund where we do later stage investments. But really what we're looking for is kind of great technology businesses that have global ambitions. And we're there to help founders who really want to build a global business.
Give us some examples, please.
So companies you might know that we've backed would be Dropbox, Slack, Facebook back in the day. We've done a lot of open source, so we invested in MySQL, Skype. I mean, those were both kind of huge early European success stories. I think Skype in some ways is the deal that really put Index on the map initially and put Europe on the map in some ways. More recently, we've been lucky enough to be partnered with companies like Datadog, Adyen, which is probably one of the biggest tech IPOs in Europe in recent years. So I think out of the portfolio, we've had 10 IPOs in the last 18 months. So it's been an extremely good couple of years for us, and we hope to continue that track record.
Wow, that's quite impressive, but to be honest, it feels a bit exotic for, most of us here. So I would prefer if you could walk us through, let's say, how people could approach you, what's the best way to do that, what's the best timing for a company to reach out to you, how's the decision process when you're interested in something, walk us through, how you're making decisions about investments, and also, let's say, after a startup gets a check from Index, what happens next? What kind of support could an entrepreneur expect from a firm of your caliber?
That's a lot of questions, but I'll take it from the beginning. So, fundamentally what we look for is founders. We look to partner with founders that have a kind of very clear product vision and a very clear vision for what they want to build. The best way to catch our attention is to build an amazing product. So, if you have a product that looks great, that has, a small kind of core user base of passionate users, that's usually enough to kind of catch our attention and to get us interested. And we'll engage with companies at a very early stage. So, there's no such thing as kind of being too early. We really like to start building a relationship early on and to get to know you, even if most of our investments are kind of from the late seed stage, I could say, onwards. It's always good to kind of get on each other's radars and get to know each other, since usually when an investment happens, it's a very long partnership, and so it's good to build that rapport up front. Other ways of getting in touch with us are to reach out via people we know. So you would be a good touch point here, and we'll pretty much always take qualified introductions by people whose judgment we respect and people we know. In terms of kind of the investment process and what we look for, I mean, I could talk for hours about this, but
please,
we
have plenty of time.
But the main thing that we're looking for is kind of signs of product market fit. Most startups don't fail because they run out of money. The real reason a startup will fail, and I have a failed startup in the past, so I know all about this, but the reason a startup will fail is usually because they fail to build something that people really want or need or love. And so what we look for initially is kind of a sign of product market fit. Do you have users that really care about what you're building? Do you have users that keep coming back? I think a sort of a good way to think about it is, user engagement. Are people kind of coming back to the product every day or every week or on a very regular basis? Is the product becoming a core part of how your users do their work, or whatever else they might be doing with the product? And so, I think Slack is a great example of that, where once someone starts using Slack, they're pretty much on the product all day, every day. And that's, that's a kind of extreme example, and we don't expect every product that we look at to have that level of engagement, but we're looking for kind of signs that there's product market fit. And the key word there is product on the one hand, and then on the other hand, there's market. And so we're looking for products that are solving meaningful problems, valuable problems, problems that people pay to have solved in large markets, or in markets that might be very small and nascent today, but are set to become very big. So in the US, we invested in a company called Ubiquity 6, which is building kind of editor tools and developer tools for AR, VR. And so, today the AR, VR market is tiny. There's almost no market, but, our view is that it's going to explode. And so whatever tool becomes the kind of standard and the best tool to, build worlds in AR or AR experiences is going to become very big. So we're looking for kind of signs that you're going to be able to address a very big market with the product that you've built. And those are kind of the things that we focus on the most. And of course, we're looking at team and other factors, but really kind of usage, passionate users, signs that people really like what you're building. Even if it's a small pocket of users, that's kind of usually enough to kind of get us excited and interested.
Okay, and then with regards to the investment process, could you please set some light on that as well?
Yeah, so I'd love to say that it's super structured, but really every process is different, but there are some commonalities in every process. So typically, we'll get in touch with you, or you'll get in touch with us about your business and about partnering, and then we'll spend anywhere from 1 or 2 to more meetings together, kind of getting to know each other and talking about the business and digging in. And the timeline on this can be very compressed into a week or 2, or it can be extended just depending on kind of what we have on and what your timeline is, and then we'll try to work to the entrepreneur's timeline. We'll then sort of figure out what kind of due diligence we need to do. And due diligence can sound very daunting, but really what that means to us is we'll walk out of our initial meetings together with a set of questions. And it's usually not a huge number of questions. It's usually a couple of things that we'd want to dig into more and understand better in case we're interested. And so that might be we need to understand the market dynamics better. It might be we need to speak to your customers to really understand how are the customers thinking about the problem you're solving and your product, how are they using it and hearing it in their own words. We might connect you with executives at large companies that we know. If you sell software, to B2B software, which is my specialty. We invest across all categories, but I spend most of my time on software, and so we might introduce you to potential buyers who will be able to look at what you have and sort of give us feedback and give you feedback, and that can be a good part of the learning process. All that's to say that the questions are different every time, but we'll typically spend a week or 2 kind of digging into really understanding the core of the business, and usually the feedback from that process will be useful to you as well, as we kind of think about it and reflect on it based on our experience, but based on what we've learned from looking at other businesses, and hopefully at that point we're sort of exchanging ideas and sort of also figuring out what a working relationship and what a partnership might look like. And so, it tends to be quite collaborative and quite open. That's sort of the initial steps. Then the next steps will be kind of introducing you to the broader team. You might have met other members of the team. I mean, we have 20 people on the investment team across London and San Francisco. And so we'll really try to make sure that you're getting a sense of what the wider firm is like, making sure that our colleagues have the opportunity to ask their questions and to get to know you. And it's really a two-way process, right? It's not just us asking questions. You should be asking a prospective investor lots of questions too, because it's, you should have the same level of rigor in choosing an investor as you would choosing any business partner or co-founder even. It's really an important relationship. So, it's...
So you need to pitch to the whole team, to the whole 20 people team before you get the term sheet to, to
yeah,
speak in more practical terms.
So then you might meet a few folks, and then what we do on our side is we prepare an investment memo. And so we write up a memo, we'll get everyone on the team up to speed, and then we'll invite you in to present to the whole partnership. And that's the investment committee. So that's the place where the decisions are really getting made. And once you come in to present, usually most sort of outstanding questions will have been answered, and usually you'll have met a bunch of folks from the team, so there will be friendly faces in the room and people you'll have met before, people already know about the business. So it's really kind of just an opportunity to talk through the business, answer any outstanding questions, and then usually after that we'll be in a position to make an offer. So the presentation might be 45 minutes. We'll spend 15 minutes discussing it, and then we'll sort of be in a position to say yes or no. And that whole process from beginning to end, I mean, the shortest I've seen it take is a few days, and the longest I've seen it take is years, in the sense that we might have known a company for years before we get to the point where we're investing. So it really just depends on the situation.
I understand that you manage a fairly large fund in terms of size. In our case, for example, we manage a 32 million euro fund, and we expect our successful companies to return the full fund back. So let's say, assuming we end up with a 15% equity stake, we target our successful companies to get sold, let's say, at about 200 million. Does the same math pretty much apply in your case? And how do these interpret in terms of the size of opportunities that you go after?
Yeah, this is probably the biggest difference. I mean, I've been at a small fund as well, and probably the biggest difference between investing out of a big fund and a smaller fund is that the sort of return threshold goes up. So, we're targeting 20% ownership, say, when we're investing at the early stage, seed or Series A. It might be slightly less when it comes to the growth stage, just given the economics of those rounds. But typically, we're sort of targeting meaningful ownership, but not much more than that, because we're always going to be minority investors. We're not there to run the business. We're there to kind of advise and support. But so that's the sort of ownership level that we typically go for, and sort of doing the maths on a $650 million venture fund, which is the venture fund we're investing out of currently, and working back to what that means. That means that we're really looking for outcomes in the billions, and so that means that we pass on a lot of potentially very, very solid businesses, very good businesses, where we just don't see a clear path to getting to a sort of enterprise value in the billions. And more importantly, we're also looking for a kind of path to get there very quickly. Now, that's something that we can work with you on, and we have a lot of experience in kind of scaling businesses very quickly. But yeah, I think it's important to be aware that when you're taking venture capital, it's, you're signing up for a certain journey, and it means scaling very quickly. And it's always, a really good idea when you're engaging with an investor to, ask that question quite early on in the process, and sort of align expectations and say, look, what sort of outcomes are you looking for? What sort of outcomes do you expect? And making sure that you're only partnering with folks that have the same expectations as the type of business that you want to build.
That's quite useful. Apart from money, what should an entrepreneur expect from Index in terms of support, etc.?
So typically we're leading rounds, and so we'll typically be the lead investor. And when we invest, and because we're taking a sort of significant ownership stake, we'll typically take a board seat. So the kind of day-to-day of how we support companies is that, one person from the team is going to be sitting on your board, and that can mean anything from a quarterly meeting to, talking multiple times a week. So, some of the companies I work with, I'm really on the phone with the founder multiple times a week, and other companies that, might be a bit later stage or kind of, more mature, it requires, fewer check-ins, but it's really kind of a pull approach rather than a push approach. So we're sort of responding to the help that you as founders ask for, and then we do our best to provide it. So board seats, you get the benefit of the whole team, so both the European and the US team, because we're all kind of equally incentivized to help out the companies that we invest in. And then we have some sort of internal support teams as well. So we've very deliberately decided that we're not going to be in the business of sort of putting people in your company and sort of telling you how to run it. We're much more in the business of just supporting you to kind of do those things for yourselves. So what we do is we have a talent team in both the US and Europe who keep track of people that we know, really skilled executives, VPs, C-level folks that might be able to help and join. So we spend a lot of time working with our companies on executive searches. We have a network of recruiters that we know and trust and who we know will do a good job. And so whatever type of hires you're looking for, we can help you out with that. We can help you out with organizational design. So, what does your organizational chart look like as you go from 10 people to 30 people to 100 people to 200 people? And because we've been on that journey many times, we can help you kind of spot the pitfalls along the way. We can say, hey, you should consider structuring things in this way, or maybe we need to hire some executives in this side of the business, or maybe we need to be investing more in this. So we can kind of help steer things based on our experience. We then also have a network development team, which we've been investing in quite a bit over the past few years, and that's been very successful. So what they do is they maintain relationships with large corporates. So say you want an introduction to the CIO of Goldman Sachs, or to the Chief Information Security Officer of Barclays, we can probably make those introductions. And so that's to both help sell. So if you're selling software, it can be very helpful to kind of open those doors. It can be helpful when it comes to thinking about M&A and exit, to be able to have relationships with the large tech companies and the potential acquirers. And it can also help in sort of helping you think through new market entry. So say you have a successful product in Europe, you want to figure out how are US customers going to respond to that. We have friendly customers that will give us honest feedback and will spend time with you kind of learning about the product and telling you what they think. So that's on the network development side. Then I think the sort of founder network is also hugely valuable. We have hundreds of portfolio companies, past and present. We have great relationships with not only the founders of those portfolio companies, but also the senior execs. So say you're beginning to think about hiring a CMO for your company or a VP marketing. We can put you in touch with sort of 3 of the best marketers that we know, and that will help you kind of calibrate, okay, this is what a truly excellent hire looks like. And so then you know what to aim for and what to look for, since probably most of you will not have hired that sort of profile before if you're first-time founders, and so it can be helpful to kind of calibrate on that. So those are some of the ways that we help. I think that the main takeaway there is that we tend to have a much more personalized approach. So we're not a machine, we sort of look at what each company needs, and then we sort of try to tailor something that will have the most impact on the business.
Okay, that's really nice and good to hear. And I guess all these are parts of why you believe a truly ambitious founder should prefer Index versus other competitors, or also are there any other good reasons?
We're very nice people. No, I think that's a huge part of it. I think.
Which means, what do you mean by nice people? Even if things go south, how do you react to that?
We always encourage founders that we work with to take references from any company. So, and you should do that, by the way, with any investor that you're thinking of working with. I can sit here and just talk about how amazing we are, but you should probably take some external references on that. So what we always say when we get close to investing in a company, or when the conversation gets more serious, is we can provide you with references. Those are going to be positive, probably, because we're providing you with those references, but you should pick up the phone and call any founder that we've ever invested in, and I think I can say with a pretty high degree of confidence that it's going to be positive, regardless of how the company did.
Okay, that's nice. What else shall we ask you?
I think we should open it up.
The floor. Yeah. Let's receive your questions, please.
As a VC considering investing in a company that may be located in a different country than where you're based, what are the main challenges you face, and how would, say, a founder having a project in Greece be able to address these?
Let me repeat the question for the video. So essentially, the gentleman is asking, what are your thoughts about geography? Are there any limitations in how much you can consider a company that is not based, for example, in London or in San Francisco? And maybe as an extension to that, what's your opinion about remote, which is a recent trend?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have been investing outside of the UK and the US pretty much from the beginning. So across Europe, anywhere in the EU particularly is no problem at all. We're not kind of worried about the local corporate structures. We're not asking you to kind of flip to a US topco. There can be other reasons why that might make sense, but sort of typically we're very comfortable investing across Europe. I think, and don't quote me on these numbers, but I think that 70% of the capital we deploy in Europe is outside the UK. So Greece would not be a problem at all. I think the bigger concern, or the sort of thing that often comes up, is what's the willingness of this company to really go for it globally. And so I think what we tend to not be so comfortable with is if the whole team is in one place, founders want to stay in one place, they're unwilling to perhaps move if that's where the opportunity is. So what we like to see is founders that are willing to move to kind of go where the opportunity is. And for certain types of companies, there's no need to move. So if you have a gaming business, or if you have certain types of consumer apps, you can pretty much do that from anywhere. But if you're selling enterprise software, for example, your biggest market is most likely going to be in the US, and so we tend to want founders to either move or be willing to spend a significant amount of time to make sure that they're capturing that opportunity. In terms of remote, so we're seeing an increasing number of kind of remote-first organizations popping up now. I think we were probably quite early to that party, given that we did a lot of open source investing. So the open source community tends to be very comfortable and very used to remote working. And so we invested in Elastic, for example, which everyone now thinks is a US business, but actually started off in Amsterdam, and they had developers all over the place, and people were kind of truly remote there. And so we're pretty comfortable with that. I think we're seeing more and more of that now. So we've been investing behind that trend. There's a company that I was just told I'm not allowed to talk about yet, which is facilitating remote work, and which is also operating on a kind of remote-first basis. And the reality is, with all the tools that we have available now, it's become so much easier to work remotely. There are trade-offs there, right? So there are all kinds of, you have to travel more, there can be communication problems, but I think enough people have made it work that it's a sort of fairly well understood problem of how you solve that. But that can be a solution to, if you can't find the right talent locally, you can hire it remotely. So we're very supportive of that, and have started thinking a lot about how we can better support the remote organizations we have.
I'd like to expand on this and move from geography to what I think matters most, which is actually culture, right? So by investing across Europe, I guess you have seen many different cultures, and there are some common traits in Europe, like underselling, not typing, not spending too much, maybe. And since Index is priding on relationship building, how did you develop a tool set to help people coming from different cultures, let's say Scandinavians to Israelis to Southern Europeans or friends, who have different cultural backgrounds?
So I think our secret weapon in that, sorry, do you want to repeat the question? So the question was, how do you support companies that come from different cultures? How do you kind of bridge cultural gaps, I guess? So our secret weapon in that respect is that I think we have 19 nationalities on the team. So we're an extremely kind of culturally diverse set of people, and a lot of us have lived, worked, studied in different countries, and traveled around quite a bit. So I think we sort of have been fairly good at that. In terms of how do you mitigate some of the sort of cultural barriers, perhaps, to building successful businesses, I think these things come with sort of pros and cons, right? So I'm personally from Iceland. I grew up in Copenhagen. I spend a lot of time in the Nordics talking to founders there, and sort of generally in the Nordics, what you see is founders that are very product focused, but maybe much less sales focused. And so I think that the best way to deal with that is to support founding teams in hiring to kind of complement whatever they might be missing on the core team. And I think that goes, whether it's about culture or whether it's about the skill sets that you have on the founding team. I think it's extremely important to be able to have that open conversation about what are we missing, what are we not good at, and what do we need to hire to kind of complement. But the great thing is that you can just hire people that have whatever you need to whatever gaps you need to fill. I mean, one conversation we were having earlier is that in Europe it's very difficult to find experienced product managers or product marketers, right? There's just a kind of limited pool of people who have managed software products at scale. And so how do you mitigate that? Well, you either hire outside Europe or you manage to find great people and train them locally, or you find some other solution. You get people to move to Europe. So these are all kind of solvable problems, but it's important to kind of not be defeatist about these things and not think that, oh, because I'm from Iceland, I don't like to sell, and so I'm never going to be good at selling. You just have to kind of roll with it and work on those things.
Why is your first time here in Greece? Why you haven't been here before? And since you came here, have you changed your opinion about the Greek startup ecosystem?
That's a great question. I think the reality is that we're all kind of overstretched and we all travel too much already. And so covering Europe is a pretty big task. And so I think the reason we're here now is that we've seen enough very, very interesting companies, and we kind of came here knowing that there were interesting companies, and I think spending some time here today only confirmed that there's a lot of potential here, and I'm sure you're going to see a lot more exciting companies popping up here. So I'm sure we'll be spending more time in Greece going forward.
Do you have an investment comfort zone based on the business? I mean, the nature of the business, or you, let's say, if you find a nice idea enough, you will invest enough.
So the question is are there sectors that we won't invest in? I think our comfort zone, I think we have to be honest with ourselves about what we are good at and what we're not good at. So if you brought me a biotech business that was going to, cure every disease known to mankind, it sounds awesome, but A, I wouldn't know how to go about assessing that, and B, I probably wouldn't be able to help you very much if I were to invest. And so we try to only invest in businesses that we understand well enough to be able to provide some reasonable level of support, and where our networks are going to be able to provide that support. And we tend to steer clear of things that we don't understand so well. So, examples would be synthetic biology. I think it's one of the most fascinating areas of tech innovation right now. It sort of in some ways feels like software in the 80s. It's sort of the toolkit. The hardware is there, and now we're kind of beginning to develop the software and the IP. But I don't yet know enough about that stuff to really, go out and make an investment. Who knows? Maybe, we do try to challenge ourselves to kind of stay on top of new stuff that's coming out and make sure that we're not missing out on the next big wave. Ultimately, VC is very much about surfing waves, right? There was the mobile wave that gave us, a bunch of huge companies. We invested in King, the Candy Crush company. We invested in Supercell. Both sort of, rode that mobile wave in a big way. And then, there was the cloud wave and the SaaS wave, which is still happening. Now we're seeing sort of a huge number of automation companies that are driven by machine learning and the sort of cost of compute coming down and machine learning techniques being easier to deploy, and so that's another wave we're riding. So we try to sort of spot things that we both understand and that we're comfortable with. It's not because we don't like to go out of our comfort zone, is that we probably wouldn't deliver very good results if we went outside it.
Please.
I've been working remotely since the 90s. By the way, thank you for coming to Greece. What are your top tips, I would say, to motivate remote teams to stay productive and on deadline?
So I'm on the board of a company called Slight, and I'm going to have to plug it. It's a sort of knowledge base for teams, very good to kind of keep remote teams working together, and that's also a remote company itself. It's SLITE. And there have been a few lessons learned there. I think one of them is that you need to kind of provide opportunities for people to get together in person regularly and make sure you stick to that. You have to allocate budget so that people can travel when they need to. If there's an important project, an important meeting that needs to happen in person, I think you just need to kind of bite the bullet and absorb that cost and allow people to get on a plane and go meet with their colleagues face to face when necessary. I think another really important thing is to have a kind of clearly defined set of processes for how you collaborate. So one of the dangers of remote is that people might not feel included in what's going on. They might feel kind of outside and sort of kept in the dark. And so you have to do weird things like you might have two people sitting in an office together, but they should be communicating with each other in the Slack channel, because that means that everyone kind of gets to benefit from the conversation they're having and finds out what they're talking about. I've seen other things like telepresence, where you can have like a screen. That feels a bit weird if you're just alone in the room. It maybe works better if it's two separate teams working, and you can kind of have a video stream between them. I think kind of over communicating is what it comes down to, and having kind of a clear set of expectations of how you keep people involved. Please.
Are you just talking with people in Athens, or you have some plans already?
So plans outside Athens?
No, in Greece.
Sorry, the question is?
The question is whether you have plans to visit also other areas or to invest.
Oh, invest.
Are you going to disclose if you are going to make an investment in a specific Greek
yeah.
company now?
I hope
or
so.
You've done already, so
Nothing. Exactly. No, I mean, hopefully something will happen over the next 12 months. We wouldn't be coming here if we didn't think that there was a serious prospect of making an investment, but there's nothing kind of on the cards in the immediate future.
So you talked about the right setup of the business, like being scalable, for example. But are you looking for a certain type of founders as well? Like having done business before, or certain personal characteristics?
So the question is, are there specific founder traits that you are looking for?
And also, how do you decide on the amount for investing?
So on the founder question, I think it's, on the one hand, it's extremely broad. On the other hand, there are certain traits that we tend to really like in founders. So the first one is being customer-centric. So people often say that you should solve a problem that you yourself have had, or you should be building something that you're solving your own problem. I'm not 100% on board with that, but I think the sort of closest proxy to that is founders being extremely close to the end customers. So one of the things that we really spend a lot of time talking to founders about when we're thinking about partnering is why are you making the product decisions that you're making, and how well do you understand the customers? And the best founders are the ones that really kind of passionately live and breathe customer feedback. They deeply understand the pain point. They have a high level of customer empathy, and that's really what usually unlocks building a great product that customers love. And so we tend to be, every investor has their own kind of biases and their own kind of way of looking at the world, but we tend to be very product-centric, and so we tend to like founders that are quite product-centric, since you can do any amount of sales and marketing. If the core product isn't great, you're probably not going to get very far. But on the flip side, if you have a phenomenal product, you can kind of mess up your sales, your marketing, everything, and people will still find it and use it. So I think sort of customer empathy is probably the big trait that unites all the founders we back. I think in terms of deciding what amount we invest in a company, it really comes down to how much capital do you need. It's always a trade-off. So say you want to raise a $5 million Series A. You probably don't want to raise...
That's a seed round.
That's a seed round, okay. So a $10 million Series A. You probably don't want to raise much more than that because, for the stage of your company, there's going to be, a price expectation. And if you raise way more than you're going to be able to deploy, you're probably going to take more dilution than you should. On the other hand, you don't want to underraise because you want to be able to get to the milestone that will then allow you to raise the next funding round. And so there are a lot of subtleties to that, but I think the main thing is just a kind of open discussion about how much capital do you need, where's that going to get you to in terms of milestones, then let's add a bit of a buffer to that, since things inevitably get delayed or take longer or cost more, and then we'll come up with something that doesn't overly dilute you as a founder, since we also care deeply about founders, having a good amount of equity, staying incentivized, since you're probably going to be raising, a bunch more rounds. You don't want to take too much dilution early on, and we tend to be very supportive of that. And then just having enough capital to getting what you need done.
Two more questions. The guy.
Talked a lot about engagement and traction, not a lot about the business model. Do you feel a good business model will follow if there is product market fit? And if yes, when will you see the market define?
So the question was, I've talked a lot about engagement and usage, but not so much about business model and monetization. What was the second part?
Yeah, if you feel like a good business model will eventually arise.
Will a good business model eventually arise? So I think, of course, there needs to be a business model, so that comes back to what I said in the beginning about kind of product market fit and solving a valuable problem to a user. So you can solve a problem for a user that's not particularly valuable and that they don't want to pay for. Or you can solve a problem that's valuable to them and that they will want to pay for. And so that sort of will give you the business model. So I spend most of my time looking at enterprise software, which means that there's a pretty clear business model. You build software that businesses want to buy and use, and if it's valuable enough for them, they will put budget behind buying your software. So that's usually quite a well-known, straightforward business model. Of course, there are other areas where it might not be as straightforward. So open source software, for example. There have been plenty of open source companies with huge user adoption and huge developer engagement and adoption that have failed to monetize because they either gave too much away for free, it was just too good and no one really needed to pay, or they didn't figure out kind of what were those sort of bits that they could charge for. So of course, business model is something that we think a lot about. I think compared to a lot of investors, particularly in Europe, we're probably less focused on that in the early days. We're much more focused on the product, but of course we have to see a clear path towards monetization in a scalable way. And it's important for you as a founder that you know what you're building towards, that you're kind of aiming to monetize and that you have some ideas. And then you'll run experiments, you can figure it out along the way.
And the final one.
What are your investments in graph database sector, the current investments in graph database sector, and whether you're planning to expand in that area in the future? I'm saying that because graph databases are very trendy. And moreover, I would like to know what is the kind of problem you see that those startup or companies are solving in that area, and you're interested in investing.
Let me actually restructure this question. Are you thesis-driven in your investments? So, for example, you say that we're going to focus on this sector and we prefer this kind of products or this kind of business models, and then looking for a company that fits in with those criteria, or are you, let's say, founder-driven and?
I think you have to be both. So we're both thesis driven and opportunistic. I think, ultimately we're not the ones coming up with the great ideas. You guys as founders are the ones coming up with the ideas. And so if a founder walks into the office and explains to me why graph databases are going to be amazing and going to be a great investment, I'll listen and I'll take that seriously. I think, generally speaking, we take both a sort of top-down and a bottom-up view. So the top-down view is very much kind of what in software specifically, what are the budget lines and the business units in a business, and what sort of software do they have, and then we kind of work backwards and figure out, what sort of portfolio do we have, where do we think the opportunity is. So, a good example is a company I invested in out of Lausanne in Switzerland. So they spun out of the artificial intelligence lab there. It's a company called NextThink. They do end user monitoring for enterprises. So they will monitor the performance of computers in the enterprise and ingest all that data and spot performance problems, spot hardware issues, network issues, etc., to allow the IT organization to proactively fix problems and also to kind of measure the health of the end user computing in that organization. And that's like a 500-600 person company now. And when we met them, we hadn't particularly been thinking about end user computing as a kind of big problem that we needed to invest behind solving. But then when we saw this company, we thought, wow, this makes a ton of sense. Companies are increasingly investing more in keeping their employees happy. You can automate a lot of the stuff that IT help desks do. No one likes picking up the phone to say, hey, my Skype keeps crashing or whatever it is. And so that was a sort of example where it wasn't thesis driven, as we came across this company, it's a phenomenal business, and we decided to invest. But of course, we do build theses on markets. And so one of the big theses is automation. And so we were able to look at this company through this lens that we're convinced that if you have a lot of data, if you have good machine learning people, you're going to be able to automate a lot of the work that you're doing. And this is clearly doing that for IT ops. And so it sort of fit a bunch of the theses that we've been working on and that we've been thinking about. So no simple answer there. It's sort of a combination of being prepared and sort of working on theses in particular fields, but then when you see something exciting, you jump on it, regardless of whether you had a pre-existing thesis in that area.
Ari, this has been a truly insightful session, taking a deep dive in how a top-tier fund thinks and acts. Are there any closing thoughts that you would like to share with the Open Coffee audience?
I'd say, I'm super excited to see, what a lot of you are working on, and there's clearly a lot of opportunity. I think there's never been a better time to be building a startup from outside the main hubs. I think you should think of being in Greece as a secret weapon. All I hear from early stage founders in Silicon Valley is how terrible it is to live there, how hard it is to hire software engineers, how expensive it is. I mean, you're paying $120K for a fresh graduate for a software engineering position. So you really have a secret weapon here, having phenomenal engineering talent, relatively low cost compared to a lot of geographies. And the important thing is just set your minds on the whole world when you're building something, and think about how you can compete on the global stage from day one. It's never too early to start thinking about, okay, who are the real big competitors that we're going up against? How do we take this from the Greek or the European market to the US market and globally? I think it's always great to sort of start thinking about that early on. and there's never been a better time to make that happen.
Ari, thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you around quite often. Let's follow up for more networking. Let's move to the bar. Next Open Coffee takes place on February 21st. Thank you.